It's so often that creatives haven't done any research at all into finance and have very little understanding of what it means to be debt-free, to save long-term, to reinvest money properly. It's often that I'll get into conversations where people open up to me and they're like, yeah, I've been carrying a credit card balance of, $5,000 for as long as I've been an adult. And so many people don't realize it's some of the worst interest you could possibly hold all the time. And you're just constantly throwing away money to this business who does not care about you at all.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 146 of the 505 podcast. Today we got Eric Floberg on the show, and he is giving you the blueprint for financial freedom. Something in the creative space that is often not talked about is money, and this entire episode is all about money and setting you up for success.
This is definitely a conversation I think a lot of creatives will benefit from. And two of the key principles that Eric talks about are one, diversification, not putting all your eggs in one basket, and two, attacking your debt and living debt-free.
Let's get into this episode. All right, Eric, I'm going to show you how to do the one-handed crack over here. So you're just going to pick it up like so. That was a really solid one.
That was pretty phenomenal.
That was one of the best ones I think I've done in a long time. A little bit of a spill. I might give myself an 8.6. Kosti, what do you got for me?
It's always a toss-up.
What do you got for me? It's either going to be great or terrible. Dude.
Oh, that was kind of good.
I'm proud of you. Let's see.
I'm surprised it didn't dent.
It didn't dent at all. It was just not a lot of oomph.
Yeah.
Mine kind of felt like a firecracker.
Yeah.
And that one just didn't have
Tends to happen a lot
didn't
in
have
my
the
life.
bass. You know what I mean? 7-1. One of your best scores though.
Thank
okay.
you.
Eric, give me the one-handed crack from across the pond.
I'm very nervous right now.
I know, you got
can't
it.
touch the top.
Yep.
Right?
Just don't start the top
Lift
on the
it up.
table. Yep. Perfect. Great
Nice.
execution. Oh, he's going to dent it.
Oh, man.
Oh, gosh. Don't put it on the table. Don't put it on the table. Oh,
Get there.
get there. You got it. Did you do
Yeah.
it?
I did it.
Okay. Did you dent the crap out of it?
No dent.
Hey, 5-7. Welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm above 5.
That's all that matters. That's all that
First time.
matters.
I'll take it for the first time.
I want to thank you so much for being on the show. One of my favorite YouTube videos that you do every single year is actually breaking down your finances. And in the creative space, I think it's a little bit taboo for people to even talk about what they're making, what they're getting from certain jobs. And I really appreciate your transparency. I look forward to that video every single year. The time 7 months ago, you were at 750,000. Have we reached 1 million yet? What is the situation like at this moment?
We have not reached 1 million yet. I think that's definitely a goal within the next 2 years. It's really been plateauing recently for a multitude of reasons, maybe 4 children being one of those. But no, I've had a full-time employee for the past really 2.5 years now. So payroll has been a huge part of that, and understanding that the past 2 years have been a huge growth phase. So Cyrus, my full-time employee now, is switching to freelance starting March 1st. So that salary is going to be gone from my payroll, and we've actually positioned myself to pursue the solopreneur route again, but now I have even more opportunities for income as I do that. So I expect that plateauing to start increasing again.
I got to say, I think if you got 4 kids, I think the 750 kind of puts you at that million. Can we talk about
It's a handicap.
hitting 1 million with no kids is like a big feat within itself. With 4 kids, kudos to you.
It's awesome.
What is the biggest stream of income that has allowed you to get to such a high net worth?
A lot of it was my course for wedding photography and wedding filmmaking. It was something I had wanted to do really since I started my YouTube channel, my photo video YouTube channel. I went to school to be a teacher. So as I started seeing success on the platform and teaching about the mediums, both stills and filmmaking, I had been curating what I wanted to make for years, and then finally dropped it. And it was more of a premium product. So, we developed a team to do that, but it's still one of the highest grossing things I've ever had. But it's a trickle at this point. It was really based off of a few launches and getting a lot of the steam and marketing on a tight window of when there were signups. So I'm open to the idea of reopening that, but now that I'm on the brave new frontier of running YouTube, I want to actually do something similar on that front. And it's been very similar because I did workshops and Patreon on the creative side years ago. And now we're actually doing one-on-one and group coaching for running. And so it's a lot of the same things and copying a lot of what I've already done.
What's a big money mistake that you see a lot of creatives making? Maybe back when you were coaching a lot of the wedding filmmakers, or just in general, people that you've chatted with online.
I don't think it's one specific thing within the industry necessarily. I think a lot of people spend too much money on gear for sure, but I always see it in people's personal finances. If they're mismanaging credit cards and just always keeping a credit card balance. It's so often that creatives haven't done any research at all into finance and have very little understanding of what it means to be debt-free, to save long-term, to reinvest money properly, to invest. And it's often that I'll get into conversations where people open up to me and they're like, yeah, I've been carrying a credit card balance of, $5,000 for as long as I've been an adult. And so many people don't realize it's some of the worst interest you could possibly hold all the time. And you're just constantly throwing away money to this business who does not care about you at all. And they're preying on you and hoping that you keep that balance. And so what I love to teach and help people recognize is that kind of crippling debt is something that is standing in the way of you exploding your business. Because once that's gone and the psychological weight of that is gone, it frees you up so much to realize like, wow, I have so much overhead that I can reinvest back in the business. And now a real gear purchase that I do need is so much more attainable. It's way less stressful, and I'm not putting it on a credit card. It's got to be credit card, whether it's personal or a business credit card. Some people open up their business and they're like, I get a business credit card now. You're like,
0% interest.
Maybe don't.
We'll get you right back to the episode, but I have to let you know that the Dream Client Accelerator waitlist is live down below. We had some amazing results in our cohort round 1. We had people closing big deals with awesome clients. Someone even 7x their rate with the exact same client a year later. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. We're going to be teaching you how to price your work, how to pitch, and about personal brand. I mean, they all tie in hand, and I cannot wait.
So if you guys want to learn how to make more money as creatives and work with your dream clients, make sure to check out the second link in the description. Our Dream Client Accelerator waitlist is open now. I have an interesting and fun question here. Let's say you were to meet a creative who was just getting started on their journey. Let's say they were anywhere between like 18 and 21 years old. If you were to be able to talk to them and say, this is how you can build wealth and generate a real business, what advice would you give to that creator just starting out on their journey?
I think it's really beneficial to dig into YouTube, dig into finance channels. I feel like we're out of the golden age of what that was. Maybe if you just go way back into Graham Stephan's channel or Andre Jick, they're all talking about Bitcoin now or whatever, but there's some really, really valuable things in there. Like him or hate him, Dave Ramsey is a great option to listen to. And I like a lot of his base principles because he speaks to a really wide audience in getting debt free. To what extent you'd want to do that, that's going to be up to you. But he's way on that credit card train of, cutting them up and just slowly snowballing that debt. So yeah, debt at large is one of those things, and getting some tools in your arsenal intellectually to understand what those concepts are. There's so many at your disposal on the internet, and just becoming more fluent in that language. That's the biggest thing, I think, from the start, because that will help you understand what the roadmap is to building wealth. And then my next one would be, if you can build your business without debt, do that. And so I guess paired with that, I teach this a lot, is the concept of working for free. And lots of creatives have an allergy to that whole mentality. And whenever I give that advice, there's always a few haters coming in just being like, this isn't sustainable. You shouldn't teach people this. It's always with the caveat that free work is never something that can be sustainable. How could it be? It's impossible to sustain. You obviously need to make money with your work to be able to survive. So really at the end of the day, you're using it as a creative marketing tool. And instead of taking out a credit card or taking out a loan and purchasing your next thing that you might not need at the moment, how about instead you use what you already have to make some free stuff, build a portfolio, and try to land another paying client, and do the opposite. Instead of taking money out and owing money somewhere, building the portfolio so you have proof of concept instead of twiddling your thumbs waiting for someone to book you.
I'm curious to ask though, do you feel like there is such thing as like good debt? Like do you find there's a time where someone could use a credit card and maybe buy something or put it on a credit card and it's like good debt to have? Or are you kind of in the camp of like, fuck credit cards, try not to have any debt?
I think I've heard plenty of people do a 0% credit card for 12 months. As long as you pay that thing off, like, yeah, more power to you. But I think you start to mess with the idea of, I can kind of dabble in this regularly as I, grow my business. And so it might give you the inclination that this is something that you could regularly do to grow. Whereas I think there's so much more exponential growth and power. Like Ramsey often talks about income being your greatest wealth building tool. Like no one's getting rich off of their credit card points or, all these different things that they try to offer you. But like Gene in our studio, he has a gazillion credit cards, and Cyrus is doing the same now just to stack all the points and pay all of them off. So if you want to be strategic with that, that then becomes a part-time job to manage all that. And so my advice then is like, well, I'd actually rather spend my time. I'm not interested in that. They are, but I'm not interested in it. So I'm not going to play that game because it's more valuable for me to spend my time trying to generate more income than play the game of getting points or doing that thing. And I think that's why a lot of people love credit cards specifically. But really you have to evaluate your risk and figure out, do I need this thing right now? And that's a completely individual question that you need to figure out for yourself. But in that process, my advice is don't do that alone. Give those options to the people you're closest with who maybe have more knowledge than you or more experience. Why tutors and mentors are so valuable, and getting a community around you because you can bounce those ideas off of them. And if you don't see a path for being able to pay that off within that 12 months, that's probably a terrible decision because you're going to hold interest on that for indefinitely and you won't know when you could pay it off. And that's a really scary place to be at with 25%.
Definitely. Have you had a mentor specifically in the business space or on your financial side of things? Like, did you pay for a financial advisor? And if you've had a mentor, what have been some of those learnings?
I kind of had a bogus financial advisor for a while that like sold me whole life insurance when I didn't know, and realized how bad of a product that was and bailed on it. But I've always just kind of rolled solo. My parents are very, very standard middle class. My dad was a blue collar worker. And my mom was a dental hygienist, and my dad would work overtime hours to make more money, but it was always kind of like, this is what we make. And so we don't spend extra. Whereas I don't know, I almost like flipped the coin on them generationally, with my approach being like, the ceiling's actually exponential for me. Like I can really kind of make as much as I want with how much work I put into this, which has its own problems, obviously. But weirdly enough, I feel like online YouTube has been the mentor, to listening to those talking heads and figuring out, kind of Frankensteining, like, what do I want my path and my life to look like, with really holding on to core principles like being debt free. The only debt we currently have is we own 2 properties and have a mortgage on each, but there's no other debt other than that. And my parents instilled that principle in me as well. And my uncle is a really accomplished businessman as well. And they really instilled the idea of no debt in me. And so I would say that's really the culprit of where I've ended up. But I wish I had a better answer. It's definitely a circumstance where I'm teaching it, and that's a good option. I know it is, but I wouldn't say there's anybody like as a North Star for me at this point.
With the homes and whatnot, like, is your goal eventually to not have to work and just be able to like hang out with your kids and have these homes be kicking you enough to sustain your living?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I know myself enough, or at least I can project that, in a few decades from now, if I was twiddling my thumbs and not working at all, I'd probably go insane because I just love doing things. I love being active. I love being busy. I've been that way since middle school and high school, just constantly spinning plates. I would love for the homes to be paid off. We're currently in a phase right now where we don't know. So we lived in the condo that we still have. We're in a single family home right now, and really trying to evaluate our renters moving out in March, and we're thinking about selling because open numbers right now, the condo is worth around, I would imagine, $375 at the moment. We bought it for $260 in 2018. So it's increased a lot in value, as many homes did during that time. But there's HOA fees, and, Chicago taxes suck, and there's just all these other factors that kind of make it annoying and not the best investment property necessarily. But with our renter, we end up, and HOA and everything, we end up having to pay about $100 a month. So it's pretty much a wash. But we have 143 left on the loan right now. So if we got the sale price that we wanted, we would just have $200K. And I've never had that like kind of lump sum all at once ever in my life. But we really would love to just take it and just dump all of it on our house mortgage. That's our idea, because we're just barely over 400 on the house right now. So bought the house for 466. It's sitting now at probably around 560, 570. So we have 100 in equity since we bought it in growth, and then we would only have 200 left on the note. So I'm evaluating now, like I'm doing all the numbers. I'm like, okay, well, if we only have 200 left on our house and we don't have to deal with the condo anymore, that gives me a really clear path to like grind super hard the next 3 years and just completely knock that out. And that's where our $3,000 a month payment goes out the window. We still have, Illinois taxes, $1,000 a month in taxes, but all of a sudden that expense is completely gone. And if I retain the same income I do now, which is growing again, then the divide just widens that much more. To go back to, I guess, one of your first questions is like, that's the wealth building tool right there, right? Or the disparity, like it's gone then, and the overhead grows like crazy then. And your income becomes that much more powerful because you can actually put it in your pocket instead of giving it to Round Point Mortgage.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, man, to be able to buy a house in LA for 460 would,
God.
Unbelievable.
Would shoot myself in the foot.
Yeah.
You hear a lot about real estate, how it can be a great investment, getting rental properties. It sounds honestly like amazing. I think it can maybe feel a little overwhelming to hear, especially if maybe you're a little bit younger and you're just trying to get your footing. So my question to you would be, for someone maybe not in the position yet to get a rental property and to go into real estate, and if their only sole income is just by, spending their time making content for someone, using a camera, and they only have one source of income, what advice would you give to someone in that position looking to bring on another source of income for themselves and to start building wealth?
Yeah, don't right now, don't worry about the rental stuff at all. Like Cyrus is literally in that position you're talking about right now. And he openly talks about his finances too. He just made his first YouTube video on his net worth and what his goals are. Currently camping around 30K in net worth with no debt. He's 21. He's doing great at this point. And his goal by the end of the year is to be at 100. And he's just setting super high goals for himself. But he's insanely disciplined. He he's done everything, all the prerequisites we've talked about with just not, he's always listening to Caleb Hammer. He's another, YouTuber with finance and interviewing people with terrible budgets. But my advice is, focus on what's right in front of you, because it was never my intention to turn our condo into a rental property. We just bought it because we wanted to live in it. We wanted to purchase a home. We knew that would be a good investment. At that point, funny enough, 2018, they're like, this is the top of the market. This is like, be so careful. Like, just think in the next 3 to 5 years, you'll probably lose value. And then that did not happen. And so you're always going to try to be playing those games. But if you want to purchase real estate for yourself, maybe that's something that you think of in the background. I would recommend that your real estate should be like your own first before you start, trying to just get a gazillion rental properties. Because if you do that, you're not accumulating wealth in the way I've described. You're taking out notes, you're taking out loans constantly. And if you play the game of, I'm gonna take out this loan, I'm gonna do the 3% down, the smallest percentage I can. Hopefully it gains in value. And I do a cash out refinance and I go to the next one. Like, that's literally how Ramsey fell apart in his late 20s, early 30s, and went bankrupt. Because if the market crashes, you're just absolutely screwed. And then I don't swing as far as him saying, like everything needs to be bought in cash. But I think slow baby steps of figuring out what your next step is gives you the confidence to then do something you wouldn't have thought of before, in the same way of getting rid of the debt and then no longer having that burden emboldens you to be like, okay, I'm going to buy this next piece of gear in cash because I can now. And there's enough in the bank account to do so. And so, yeah, it's practically then it's what are your next steps for diversification? How can you go from just this one trick pony of doing this one thing, making Instagram reels in this style for these brands, and how do you start building out a Swiss Army knife? How can you find a sustainable, real way to build income in a diverse way? So for me, as an example then, is I can do wedding photography and wedding filmmaking. I now can do commercial photography and filmmaking work. I have 2 YouTube channels where I can do brand sponsorships. I have access to do education for photography and filmmaking. I can now coach with running. And so there's just a multitude of ways where I can produce that income. I always look at it as this metaphor of there's all these fires going, and sometimes one might be embers and one is a bonfire just raging. And as long as you're keeping those embers alive, you can always throw something back on it to get it going again. And I personally love that perspective because it gives me all the power I want to go, all right, I'm going to lean into this thing really hard right now and get it going again. Or I'm just going to keep going on this one because it's giving me a lot of value, both on a personal level and a financial one.
I really like the fires analogy. I think that makes a lot of sense when you put it into that perspective. When you were coming up, were you living broke and putting a lot of your money into investments? Like, were you feeling like, wow, I don't have a lot of cash right now on hand? Like, what was that situation like with money in those earlier days? Because like, I feel like I'm living right now quite broke because I invest damn near like everything that I make. So I feel pretty broke like a lot of the time, even though I'm investing like all of this money that I make. I live off of a lot littler money than I could live off of. And I'm curious, what your relationship was like when you were, younger in your 20s.
Well, I think what you're doing is great because that's really a disposition of delayed gratification. And that's like our society is really allergic to that. Like, people want the satisfaction of doing what they love now. And there's an argument to be made of, I'm in my 20s, I'm in my 30s, I have a capable body to be able to travel and enjoy it. Okay, sure. But what is the fallout of that in your 50s and 60s? Is because a lot of time people are doing that and then they're like going out and raging as well. And you're like, well, and if you're then on top of that, if you're not taking care of your body, you're not working out regularly, there's that long-term mindset. If that's missing, that's a problem because it's so easy to be caught up in the now when you're young. And, over half of your life is going to be a battle of your body falling apart. And not being able to do that stuff. So I love thinking about this stuff holistically instead of just what's right in front of you. So it's awesome that that's the case for you. And I felt like that was the case for us as well. When we first got married, we were broke. We spent $8,000 on our wedding, and a third of that was on my favorite wedding photographer. And we just lived super cheap. My wife had about $8,000 in student debt from community college, so we just immediately attacked that as fast as we could. We had to get a loan on a car as our family grew with 2 young ones, and I just attacked that immediately as well. It was that mentality again of anytime there was any debt, it was just get rid of it right away. And very early on, I was teaching on a salary of $40,000 and then shooting weddings on the weekend. So it very quickly got to the point where I was making 6 figures between the 2 of them. I'm like, well, there's a lot of disposable income here. I need to be careful. We need to budget it well and then get rid of all the debt and start investing. And it started primarily with a Roth IRA. Just max that out for both of us each year, because that's going to be tax-free money that you get after 59 and a half. This is all relevant to Americans, obviously. There's other programs in different countries. But ours, and I think one of the most valuable investments really young is the Roth, as a lot of financial advisors talk about, because when you take it out at 59 and a half or beyond, all of the money that's gained on that account is tax-free. And it's exponential growth if you're investing in it by 18 or even before the custodial Roth as a kid. So yeah, we were doing that very early on. And then I've just kind of had a kind of more of a fun Robinhood account on the side as we went as well. And then the same deal as the business, like just diversifying different things. Like we have our condo and there's equity there. We have our home, we have equity there. I have a Robinhood account that's been steadily growing for the past 8-9 years.
Did you automate it, like the savings? Is it just every month there's an amount going out to these specific things, or was it, let's see where we're at and then I'll put it in?
Yeah, I think we had to evaluate what my income was. And once it started to plateau and it was reliable income, we started to, I contribute $500 a month to a SEP IRA with my business. And that's a
love a good
for
SEP
my business's sake. And then we just do a lump sum into our Roths, or I don't do a Roth because I have too much income at this point, but either do a backdoor Roth for myself and then fully fund my wife's. So we have those 2 retirement accounts. We have my SEP IRA and we have my Robinhood account. So it's very spread out. And, when we go back to that house conversation, like the Robinhood account now is nearing that 6-figure mark. So if we can sell the condo, put 200 on the 400 at the house, we're down to 200 left. If I can then, I think the game for me is going to be, okay, over the next 3 years, how do I increase my income and then just dump it on this account and try to get that thing to 200 so we can just lump sum, just boom, knock it all out. For my Robinhood account, I do have $20 going into VTI every day, and I have $10 going into Apple every day. That's changed throughout the years. I've been more aggressive on single stocks in the past, but as we approach this next phase, I'll probably up those amount daily. But I've been on at least Apple and VTI. I've been on that minimum of $30 for like 4 or 5 years now. Every market.
You should put it into Nvidia. It's doing great right now, I've heard. Did you see this?
No.
Just lost like hundreds of billions of dollars. I didn't even know that was possible. Yeah, because there's another app that made like a Chat GPT competitor for $5 million. I
saw that.
And it's just as fast, and it's pretty crazy to see where it's going to go. And they're like, I think OpenAI, it was like hundreds of millions of dollars to create OpenAI's like first Chat GPT or whatever. And this one was made off of $5 million. And what's crazy is there's going to be 100 other ones just like that, utilizing that same sort of software, which is really crazy.
Yeah,
my Nvidia stocks looked better, but it's all good, dude.
There's so much risk in single stocks.
It's
like
crazy.
Even Apple, I'm like, you just never know. And it's not that it's going to go to zero, but in the time frame that you were expecting a 10% return year over year, it could just be like in the tank for 5 years straight. And so that's why an ETF is just so much more versatile and safe, because it's just so much more spread out.
Yeah, you're really DCAing though, man. Every single day. I love that. Like, doesn't matter if it's going up or down, baby. $10 or $20 in. Okay, what would you tell someone who has the mindset of, I don't make enough to save.
Make more money.
Come on.
Go make more money.
Come on. I think I think that's it's a true statement, because I was once in a place where I was like, dude, I'm trying to save like every single cent, right? But I'm like, I just need to try to make more money.
Yeah.
Like, I'm looking over here at my finances, and I'm like, whatever number that was that I was at that time period, I'm like, I just need to figure out a way to get $1,000 extra bucks a month and like add on another client, and my life will be tremendously easier, instead of trying to like, hoard these pennies.
It's interesting because I was wondering where you were going to take your answer, because it's either stop spending the $5 on a cup of coffee and like budget yourself well, or
Dude, Eric
it's,
likes his
hey,
coffee.
make more money.
Eric loves his coffee.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
That's so funny, dude.
I think this disparity of creatives, where they're so hyper fixated on making the next best edit and getting the most views on an Instagram reel, but they're not willing to be creative on how they can make more income. It's like, you have all the skills to brainstorm creatively as an entrepreneur. So get out of your rut of thinking it needs to be done this way and spending your time on things that's not actually generating income, and figure out ways that it could be doing things you hate. Hey, welcome to life. Like, that is sometimes what you need to do to either get out of debt or to not be in that position where you don't make enough and you can't save, or you can't get out of that rut. And it goes back to that delayed gratification. And this is why I love running so much. It's like, if you want that euphoric feeling on race day, you need to put in, we went to the track at 5:30 this morning, and we did 13 800-meter repeats. And I wanted to die. It was awful, but I know that work right now needs to be done to have a race day on March 29th that is going to blow everything else I've done out of the water. And it sucks, but it's necessary. And that discipline, I could get on the train of training and running, and however you want to look at it at the gym. Doing that kind of stuff and diversifying that kind of discomfort in your life can manifest so greatly in your creative and entrepreneurial life as well. And that's so true. Like, there's a reason why the stereotype is that these entrepreneurs are always in the gym as well. It's like they work off of each other, and a good fitness and a body that is healthy is going to give you the results you need on that other front. If you're constantly feeling like, man, there's this fog around me all the time, I can't go out and make more money, I'm just trying to survive. Well, it might take you being really disciplined to make your health a priority, so that you can feel the motivation to then get after it financially.
I was chatting with a guy at our gym the other day, high net worth individual, and he was just chatting with me in the gym, and he's like, if I could tell you one piece of advice, he's like, it's to just keep on this train of coming to the gym as frequently as you can, because he's like, I'm 60, he's like, I'm super wealthy, he's like, but I'm not physically fit at all, and he's like, I'm really mad at myself, because he's like, yeah, well, I have this awesome business or whatever. He's like, I wish that I would be in a healthier place to really be able to enjoy this as much as I possibly could. And I think that's really important. And it's something where I feel like all this hard work in the gym or running, whatever it is that you do, it does manifest into everything you do. Those little wins stack up, and like the discipline that you get from waking up and doing 13 800-meter repeats that discipline will trickle into everything that you end up doing.
We must be on the same training program, because we did that
we did that
couple days ago.
What's today? We did that on Sunday.
Yeah.
At 5 a.m. though, a little bit earlier than what you were working with.
Man, you're doing VO2 max on the weekend? What are you doing?
Yeah, we'd like to hit our VO2 max every couple of days. We like you're DCAing with the Apple stock, we're DCAing with the VO2 max,
Yeah, just every
that was
few
a
days.
perfect analogy.
Trying to see where we're at. That's so funny. We know a lot of creators can get stuck in the trap of just accepting brand deals and having that be your sole income. And it can be very stressful to be waiting on an email, or you're doing outreach. You're like, my God, I really need one of these brands to like reach back out to us and hit us up. Was there a period of time where you may have been doing that, and how did you break out of it? Or was it always you doing these multiple things?
So I'm really thankful that was never a circumstance I fell into. Brand deals I think really any income stream that I have has always just been something I'm not relying on. And I think that's the magic of it. and I just had a conversation with my brand rep at BPN. So I'm a BPN athlete, Bare Performance Nutrition, based out of Austin. All of my supplements, and we just raced Austin half marathon last weekend. We're having a team lunch afterwards with all the athletes, and my rep Tony, who's a close friend of mine now. Also phenomenal. Like, I'm not trying to just plug them on your podcast, but like finding brands that like treat you as well as they treat me and the other athletes, that's unbelievable. And when it's personal and relational, instead of this transactional, we need these assets, da 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 da. Like, I'd say run from that if you can. But I fully understand some people are in circumstances where you have to take those deals to be able to pay the bills, and that's totally okay too. A really, really difficult position that brands find themselves in when, in BPN circumstance, like rotating the roster, having to drop athletes or bring athletes on. It's brutal because a lot of people will be so reliant on that income for doing what they're doing. In this specific case, they're training. And so this might be their sole source of income to train all the time, and they're not diversifying. So if they get the call that like, hey, it's not working anymore, we need to part ways, they might be devastated. And that's just so brutal. It sucks on the relational front because it is so amazing. And at the end of the day, that's just business, and that's brutal. But I was telling Tony, like, I hope you know that if you ever have to have that conversation with me, it's going to be met with, I'm so thankful for the time we had together. I'm fully aware that this is a tough decision that you have to make, but one that I trust is in your best interest as a business. So there's no harm in that. And I'm okay because I have all these other things going. So to be in that position is so incredible because then it fosters so much gratitude with like having those relationships and those brand scenarios, because the transactional stuff can just be some of the most deflating and difficult grind that you experience in creative work, because most of the time it's a brand demanding how you do things and dictating your creativity for you and putting stipulations on you. And I still take those sometimes, and just, it's that, again, that doing what I don't want to do so I can have cash to be able to do the things I want to do. And it's all a balance there. But my biggest piece of advice is build infrastructure for yourself so that you can say no at any time. That an email comes in, it's this brand that you're like, oh, I've always wanted to work with them. And you look at the contract and you're like, absolutely not. You could just be like, hey, it's not a good fit. Thanks,
when it
though.
says greetings.
Yeah.
Greetings.
Oh gosh, and they call you the wrong name.
Greetings, Michael.
I think that's great advice, though. I think there is a ton of power in saying no, and if you can be in a position to say no, you won't get in a compromised. You won't get yourself in a compromised position where you're taking something on because you need the money. You're not going to enjoy doing it, and you're just going to resent it, and your time is also better spent like in another way.
I think I've been doing a lot of thinking about this because like seeing athletes online be influencers, creators in this space, a lot of them are under the false assumption that they are entrepreneurs. And if they're fully reliant on the funding of their business being from an entirely different company, they're not building any kind of company for themselves. They're just building their own name and brand. And so there's nothing wrong with that at all, but you have to understand that there's no sustainability in that. If you lose your steam like you most often do online over the course of a few years, or you have some tragic event in your family where you can't make content for 3 to 6 months, any of those circumstances, you're not building hedges around your business. And so it was so funny as we at Athlete Week, we had a speaker come in, Donald Miller, and he's wrote narrative books like Blue Like Jazz, but he has this brand, and the name's escaping me right now, but the concept's incredible. Story Brand is what it's called. Highly recommend looking into this concept. He taught on Story Brand, and the whole concept is, as a business owner, you have to make your client the hero of a story. and not make yourself the hero, because you have to position yourself as the guide and letting them be the hero of whatever you're helping them accomplish. And so having that change of mindset then brings you into strategy when you're having meetings of how can I bring you to that point of the finish line where you want to be, instead of this transactional piece of what do you need from me? How can I build you an incredible commercial? And it really confused a lot of people in the room, because everyone was sitting there and was like, holy crap, I'm the hero of my story. Like there's no client that is the hero. I can't even. And so it took a lot of discussion to really kind of unpack that with a lot of people in the room, where I'm like, no, it's not. So what he's saying isn't for you and what you're doing right now, but it could be. And I think honestly, you should be working towards that, because when this dissolves, which it most likely will in the next 5 to 10 years, you have something to fall back on and can pursue on your own, a foundation that you can work off of.
What have you learned from being a business owner and having to hire a team? I think a lot of people, maybe they have one employee, or maybe they're thinking about hiring an employee. We had an employee that we unfortunately did have to let go. Like the expenses were just too high for us at this time.
Mm-hmm. It also just, it didn't make sense for what we
were doing. Yeah. And I'm curious of like what you have learned, because I think that, it's something that's it's really hard to have to do that. And I know that you've been, you said you're putting yourself in a position to be the solo entrepreneur. Are you excited about going back at it like by yourself? Like, talk us through that decision.
I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
He's like right over my
Cyrus. I'm super excited.
What's so awesome about our relationship is that we're very open with each other about what the next phase looks like. We're very open about finances. I'll share with him a huge win of like a big contract I just signed, and he won't feel bitter being like, oh, wow, you're making that much more. I'm stuck on the salary. He has so many opportunities within the confines of what he did with me for this first year. And he built up community, and he established roots, like really solid roots in Chicago. So much so that after a year, he's like, yeah, I don't really need you anymore. And I'm like, great, awesome. That's what I was hoping for you. And I'll still hire him contractually. Like, we'll probably work. We haven't had the discussion yet, but after the contract, I'll probably hire him every week or every other week to help me film some stuff. And now that I have more income to spend on things like that, it's going to be really fascinating to work in that capacity. And I know that nuance and that change is going to open up a new level of creativity within myself. And with this as well, we don't need to be in person as much anymore. So I can work from home a whole lot more. I'm not spending an hour and a half commuting back and forth every day.
Are you leaving the office? Are you going to cut it, you think? Are you going to cut your space, your studio space?
No. So I'll still, it's crazy affordable. It's very unfair. And I'm so sorry for the information I'm about to give you. But our rent's like $1,100 a month, and we split it 5 ways. So
it's split 5 ways?
5 ways.
Yeah, there's 5 of us in here, and it's 900 square foot space. We have 14-foot ceilings. It feels like highway robbery. So we're like, well, yeah, keep the space. It's great. Like, I have a relationship with barbers where I get free haircuts, and every once in a while I'll shoot some photos for them. So they'll all come in here, have a space to shoot some portraits. Boom.
That's awesome.
And stuff like that. If we need a client meeting, we have a whole living room over there with a couch and a chair. We have all of our gear housed here. We can podcast in this room. So having this at my disposal is totally worth, only going 2 times a week if that's what I end up doing.
Yeah, that's so nice. God, dude, if we could get a spot here for that, I think if we got a studio in LA, minimum $5,000, and it'd be a shoebox, which is crazy.
Well, another thing I wanted to talk on with the whole, I don't have enough to invest. You might have to have the really hard conversation of figuring out where you live and what your costs and expenses are in a place like that. Now, it's a two-edged sword because my friend Chris Chu, who's absolutely killing it in New York City right now, his cost of living skyrocketed. I mean, he was coming from the Bay Area, but he was living with his parents. He went off on his own to New York City, crazy expenses, but he found so many good connections and brands to work with there where his income is actually larger, and the ratio of income to expenditure is the gap is so much wider there. Now, if you're really struggling in a place like that and you're like, no, I have to be here because this is where all of the opportunity is. Well, let's maybe evaluate and be humble for a second and realize, is there that much there? If you're not able to make it work, how can you pivot and figure out? And if that means moving to a different city, it means moving to a different place, that might be something you need to consider. And it's like, really at the end of the day, like if you're pursuing this stuff, you have to realize that you're the decision maker in these scenarios. And those decisions are not easy. But if you need to make more money, if you need to invest so that you can have that future for yourself, those are some of the hard things you might be tasked with.
I don't know if I could give up the LA sunshine. Yeah. I will say though, the beach, it's nice to have, but LA beaches ain't it, dude. They're not that nice. They're kind of gross. I love the beach.
I think it just depends on what beach you go to. I think
our
our beach sucks. I think you got to go a little north or you got to go south.
Yeah.
And then the beaches are really nice.
Yeah. I do want to circle back. I do want to circle back to what you were saying about how inevitably 5-10 years down the line, if you're making content, as much as you might think it's on this trajectory of going up forever, either you're burning out or you become quote unquote like irrelevant, or you're just like not as hot as you once were. Mm-hmm. Is that just for everybody? Because like you've done a really good job also, like you've been on the internet for a minute, you've been making content, and you've done a great job of like pivoting. Like if something isn't serving you as much as it once was, like you've pivoted and you've done a great job of having very long career of making content online. Is it just inevitable that
like a shelf life almost for creators?
And how can someone put themselves in a better position?
I know exactly what you're saying. It's really similar to the discussion in the wedding photography world, because people are always like, you're not going to do this forever, blah, 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 which I also like, that's a difficult question because that just presumes that you aren't going to. And there's people who are absolutely crushing shooting weddings in their 40s now. The guy who shot my wedding, Benj, is a friend of mine, still shooting weddings, and he's getting to almost 40 now, and he's been doing it for almost 20 years. And like really the longevity of this stuff is what you make of it. Now it might be fully out of your control with the internet, and that's just the reality. My advice, and this is always the advice I give to people who are interested in starting YouTube, you need to be really passionate about what you're making as a core. And I stopped making stuff on my main channel for a while because I was just not passionate about making that stuff. The really difficult part about that is, again, going back to that conversation of if all of my eggs are in that basket, I'm screwed. And if all my eggs are in that basket, I have to keep making it, and it's driving me insane and it's making me depressed. Thankfully, I've been building different lanes, different verticals, if you will, different fires where I can pivot into this other stuff. And I can follow where the passion leads. And weirdly enough, now that I've been doing the running stuff for so long, I'm feeling this fire to come back to the creative stuff and start talking about finance again in a really profound way. Like I really want to do a whole series about that house stuff. Like, are we going to sell the condo? What is next? Follow the story. Because what I've realized about the running stuff is that it's so easy to make because it's just a docuseries of my life and training. And so there's always a story. There's a story in each video. There's a story in each training block. There's a story way bigger out in my progression of times over the years. And so it's so easy to just go back to that core. Whereas the creative stuff is just like, you're just grasping at straws all the time. What does the algorithm say? What new release happened? What camera? What tutorial can I make? And so, like I sat at my desk yesterday making the newest episode for my training series on the Run channel. And I texted my wife and I was like, I'm in a groove. Are you okay with me staying late tonight? She obliged. I rarely do this, but I was like, I'm just enjoying it so much. This one's so fun for me to make. And that's always the stuff, like it's started at a 5 out of 10 today. It's quickly going to 1 out of 10. And you can tell that the passion is there. And if I feel that and I know that that's happening, that's how I know it's sustainable. And I fully understand that at some point that's probably going to go out, and that's where I can step off the gas. I won't fully step off the gas though. That's the biggest thing. This is like the main channel. I was still in the least amount of posting, I was still posting a dozen times a year. So like at least once a month.
With the running channel specifically, I want to dive into that a little bit because I think that you've been able to totally pivot into something that you're interested in and very passionate about. And I think that's really cool and something that we urge people to follow their passions. I think when you can figure out something that you're passionate about that can also sustain a little bit of an income, it's a beautiful thing because you work so much harder at it. And I'm curious, when did the idea for the running channel kind of manifest? You started it 4 years ago. You took 2 years off. And then you come back 2 years later and you're just every single week. And the channel is vastly outperforming the subscriber count. Like it is absolutely crushing. And I mean, that's something that you love to see on YouTube. You love to see it like swinging above where you're currently at. What's the process for this running channel? Where do you see it going?
Yeah, the way it started was like I ran my first 2 marathons in 17 and 18, had no idea what I was doing, and then finally put in a good block in 19 and progressed a lot. So I was right around the 4-hour mark in the first two, and then I ran a 3:10 in 2019. So there was a massive shift in me being like, oh, this is fun, like training like this and progressing and seeing that big of an improvement. I was like, oh, this is highly addictive. I need more. And when I failed, I was really pissed at myself because I've always been athletic. I've always picked up sports and been able to make the team or, whatever. And so to fail as hard as I did in those races, I need to do this the right way. And figuring out that process was one of the most transformative things in my life because it really taught me what the grind like that is and how it's a metaphor for virtually everything. And so as I progressed in times, 2020, New York got canceled, so I ran it on the lakefront here. It was a crazy cold day and ran 3:05, and it just kept progressing. So those were the first videos I made was in 2020. I felt like I didn't have anything to make in COVID because I didn't want to make a bunch of like tutorials inside in my condo. And all I had been watching at that point, since running was such a passion, 2018 to 2019, I was nonstop watching running YouTube. And so being a filmmaker and having my main channel, I was always like, oh, I could do this if I wanted to, but I don't have the time to right now. I was still shooting a lot of weddings, like other things, family's growing. And so when the opportunity presented itself in COVID, where I was like, I have no work to do, all the weddings are being postponed, I'm twiddling my thumbs, I don't feel like I can make any YouTube videos. I made running videos kind of in the style of all the channels I was watching. And so I was like, this is fun, but it really wasn't gaining much traction. I got to maybe like 300-400 subs and not, that many views. And once work started picking back up, I just kind of left it. It was like, oh, this is just a fun little side project. Cool. Maybe I'll, go back to it someday. And so after the classroom dropped, I got a huge spike in income, hired my first employee. And when I found out that fall of 22, I was racing Chicago again. And I had missed a sub 3 mark for 4 or 5 years. That was always my goal this whole time. I knew I was positioned to do it in 22. And so I turned to him and I was like, we need to film this race and we need to make a vlog about it. And so we had a whole plan. We filmed the race. I went sub 3. We made the video and I went hard on that video because I knew that race, like knowing YouTube, I knew that race video would do really well, especially since I hit that goal. And so that got a ton of views and I was like, okay, there's something here. And then we started rolling. And when I started approaching the 250 goal, the first video I made about 250 exploded. And I'm like, okay, there's really something here. And that's where, if you see the proof of concept like that, that's when you're like, okay, gas on the fire, weekly, let's go. How do we do this and make it sustainable? And it's just been growing ever since. And it's still in that phase. Like I've signed some of the biggest contracts I've signed on YouTube in this space. And it's just so fun. I just love it a lot.
You brought up that you failed in 17 and 18. Is that because you just didn't run as quickly as you wanted to in like the 4-hour mark?
So I was trying to go sub 3 in those races. So yeah, in 17, I ran through half in 1:35, which if I doubled that in the second half, I would have ran a 3:10. So I was like cooking in that race and just completely blew up and had a horrible second half. After mile 18, I couldn't run for more than 30 or 60 seconds before needing to walk again. So I came in at 3:50. The next year, I booked a wedding the day before the race, not realizing. And so I was on my feet for 10 hours the day before. And once I realized that going into the fall, I was like, oh, I'm not going to train that hard because that's going to be a waste. And that's when I just I even went out slow. I went through half in 1:45 and just blew up even harder in the second half that one and got just under 4 hours. So the next year I teamed up with a friend who knew a lot more about training, and we properly trained. And that's when I ran a 3:10.
Explain this to me, because I've gone on one run this year trying to,
He's going to actually join the cohort.
Yeah.
Can you help people get to a mile?
Yeah.
Just 1 mile is all we're looking for over here.
Can you explain the significance of the 2:50 time for a marathon?
I always wanted to go sub 3 because it was this gold standard at that point for my age group, and being a male, that was the Boston qualifying standard. So Boston is this highly esteemed race in the US because you have to qualify to get in with a time. So based off age brackets, you have different time qualifications. But for me, I was in the hardest bracket out of all of them, and you needed to go under 3. And they even have so many people that have been breaking 3 that then the cutoff time becomes 2:55. And so even people running 2:56 didn't get in, at that time. So that's even continued to lower, so much so that now it's 2:55. So that was just kind of an arbitrary goal, and one that a lot of people have because of that Boston standard. But for me, it was the psychological push, because once I actually broke 3 and ran a 2:57, the floodgates really opened up. And I realized oh, I can't just be training for a fall race. I need to train for a spring race and a fall race. And if I keep stacking these bricks, then all of a sudden I'm just going to keep getting fitter and fitter every spring, fall. And it's just been a progression. So I went 2:57, 2:48 the next spring, 2:39 the next fall, 38 and 33. So now we're trying to go for 2:30, which is horrifying.
You're in the peak as a male. You're maybe from 27 to 35. But with running, I feel like you can keep progressing as you get older. Who's the really famous runner? He broke a sub 2 hour marathon, right? And he did it
Elliot,
in his 40s.
Yeah. So he's finally starting to show signs of aging, but he's 40. So the way I look at it is I feel God willing, I have a solid 4 or 5 years left in my peak marathoning. I'm 33 now. So it is that sport where, you see, even beyond that too, it's really interesting. If you're talking lifetime PRs, you're pretty much at 40, depending on what your progression is. That's where you'll start to see a decline, late 30s into 40. But even then, there's all these really cool opportunities like Masters records or holding the world title for the 50 to 55 age bracket. And then you're racing people in your age group. And then it becomes there's this really famous guy in the running world. His name's Ken Rideout. And he's just this savage. He just beat me. He's 53. He just beat me in Austin the other day. Ran a 1:10 half. He runs a 2:28 marathon at the age of 53. So he's top 3 in the world. So I'm oh, I want to be like that. I want to, it might not be a lifetime PR, but I can see again the longevity of what this looks like as a sport for myself, because I love it so much. I don't see myself shying away from it, but I'm also super competitive. So it'll be hard to not have the opportunity for lifetime PRs eventually, but that's a reality for everybody. So you make the best of it and then just train as hard as you can at that age.
Okay. Because I was starting to feel I'm turning 30 this year, and I'm
oh, you have so much time if you want to do it.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Brain, I got time, dude. You're in trouble.
Time is not on your side, dude. In a few weeks, you're going to be ancient, dog. What's the process for creating the running content versus more the traditional filmmaking content? Is it the same exact process? Or do you think about title and thumbnail for those first and then you go out and make it? What is that situation like?
For the creative stuff, it's a whole lot of storyboarding and traditional YouTube concept, Google Doc, shot deck, inspiration, scripting, all that stuff. If I really want to be intentional with it, and those tend to be the videos that do very well. And that's, I think at this point, what you need in the creative space. Otherwise, if you just sit and talk to the camera, depending on the subject, some people really like that. If they're really good at it, great. But most of the time, any creator in that space is going to sit down and that video will probably flop if it's not super interesting. So that's where I'm at on the creative stuff. Or if I can pull from nostalgia in a meaningful way, like I can dig into the archives and make something off of a talking head that's really impactful. Like Danny Gavers is a great example of the video he just made yesterday, where he was like, make stupid videos. He sat and talked for 4.5 minutes, but he's pulling from the archive of all of his incredible work and then saying something very profound. And everyone's like, resonate, great. I think, yeah, there's two sides there. Whereas the running stuff right now, what is working is these continual episodic series. So I usually do a 12 episode series over 12 weeks leading to a peak race. And so it's just so fun because it follows all the same principles of a plot diagram for a story, with exposition at the beginning and setting the scene. And throughout every episode, you're just slowly building towards a climax, which ends up being the race. And you have a race breakdown, which is more of the denouement and post-resolution and figuring out like, okay, what do we learn from this and what's the goal moving forward? So that's really working. And what's cool is like, I'm doing it again this series, but my series, the most popular one was Boston last spring. And we used this theme song. And on our shakeout run at Boston, like people were coming up to me and singing the song to me as almost a theme song for the series, like, Friends theme song, and people always, loving that. It becomes its own like ecosystem and world. So I'm going to keep doing that as long as I feel like it has steam. And then outside of that, I'll make progression videos, kind of zooming way out and seeing what my progression is over time. Those videos do really well as well. But it's so much easier right now in the running space because all I have to do is just turn on the camera and document what's happening that day, because coach gave me a workout. Here we go. This is what we're doing. And this is how I'm fueling. And this is how it went.
Do you feel pressure to keep up with weekly on YouTube? Like, do you feel like that has to stay to sustain that channel, or what is that relationship like?
Yeah, I do feel pressure for that. But at the same time, like, it's a pressure mixed with passion, where like whoever does YouTube and says they don't care about or don't get that
serotonin
kind of serotonin euphoric buzz after posting, like they're just lying to you. That is a really reinforcing principle, good or bad, for the platform. So getting that response is definitely a huge dopamine hit. So that fuels some of it, but it's really trying to just keep that in check. That's where, like, yesterday, I shouldn't have done what I did. Like, my wife was gracious enough to allow me to have that yesterday, but that's not the norm for myself. Like I said, I don't know if I've done that for, the past 6 to 10 months, but it's more so of like, I want to be consistent based off of the passion and what I want to share without like taking massive breaks. And I think a lot of YouTube creators really fall into a dangerous place when they're like, it has to be by this day, and I'm forcing myself into this box. It's great to give yourself accountability in that for consistency's sake, but it goes back to that conversation we were having where it's very similar to being put into a brand sponsorship deal. You all of a sudden become that brand to yourself, where if you're in a time in a season where you really need to step off the gas and rest or take a break, or you're burnt out, like having that looming over you can be something that's really detrimental to your own mental health.
Yeah, 100%. Have you approached monetization on the running channel any differently than you have on your main channel? And I think it's really cool because you are a sponsored athlete, which is dope.
Yeah.
So
you're a pro athlete, dude.
Yeah, which is cool. That's definitely on my goal list once we get these running numbers up. But yeah, can you talk about the monetization, your mindset going into your running channel versus the main channel, and does it differ in any way?
Yeah, it actually differs quite a bit. On the running stuff, it's on both sides. It's having no expectation of ever getting anything, and anytime I do get a contract, it's like, oh wow, this is a huge blessing, and I'm really grateful for it, but not expecting it. Every time a contract comes for renewal on either side, I'm always like, I'm just gonna fully intend that they're gonna drop me this year, and most of the time they don't, and it's a really pleasant conversation. I'm like, great. But for the running stuff in particular, it's so much easier to have more leverage. I've been building all of my sponsored contracts in a way where they really favor me and allow me to do exactly what I want. So none of my sponsorships, I think I signed one this year that's a bit more obligation. There's only a couple on the year. A lot of the sponsored stuff I do is really not mentioning it at all. It's a holistic sponsorship. It's a contract throughout the whole year, and the expectation is I'm constantly referring to it in a natural way, and it always lives in my description, as opposed to this video sponsored by blah 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 blah. And so that's a crazy difference, because the way I've been explaining, I hope I can bring it back to the creative world and show my running channel as proof of concept, because this has been working incredibly well. If I use BPN as an example, that's one of those contracts. And I'm like, first of all, the only stipulation I have on that one is that I'm posting it once a month. Like, that's it. But that's not their expectation. Their expectation is like, yes, we have to have that in writing, that you're doing that at least once a month. But we know you're going to do it organically, because the way you do stuff is integrating it all the time. And so it's so simple to just be like, all right, I'm running a workout today.
Go, Joe.
2 scoops of G1M is going
Boom.
in. And this is what I'm fueling throughout. I'm going to take a gel at 3, 8, blah, blah, blah. And then it's just on the screen. It's like, if you ever want to try BPN, 10% off, use code Floberg. That's it. And it's like, it's not in your face. It's not asking you to sign up for a free trial. It's not doing a campaign for quarter 2. Like, it's just, no, this is a part of my training. Koros is another one. So it's like, okay, built a track workout today. It's going to call out splits at every 800 and give me my rest period with walk. And it's going to beep at me. Watch. And then I'll hit the line and be like, there it is. Just really, really natural. It's hard to do that in the creative space because you're not actively doing something. And that's really kind of my gripe with that niche. Is I think so many people find success on YouTube because they're actually doing something in the world and they're documenting the process of doing that thing. Whereas the creative side has become so meta, where it's like, let me teach you how to make this video about making this video about making this video. And you're like, ugh, there's so many layers on like, what are we even talking about right now? Whereas using filmmaking as a medium to actually provide information or story is, I think, what's so compelling. Is what makes my favorite channel right now, Outdoor Boys, so compelling.
That is so funny you say that.
Out in the wild. Oh, we're all in it right now, right?
Love that guy's videos.
We're dialed.
I love, though, going onto TikTok and seeing people clipping his videos, because then I got a community in the comments. And I'm like, people will be like, dude, it's 3 a.m. We all have to go to bed. And I'm like, fuck, it is literally 2 a.m. We need to all go to bed. And then someone's like, I know it's super late when an outdoor video hits on the talk. I'm like, God, dude. That guy makes the most wholesome content. I wish him nothing but the best, dude. I hope he's a raging millionaire and just absolutely crushing life. I can't believe those videos are getting 36 million views.
That's absurd.
It's unbelievable. Good for him, dude. I hope he just rides off into the sunset for those wholesome videos.
Do you think BPN, though, like your relationship with them obviously is incredible? Do you think it's because Nick Bear is behind it and he himself is he's a creator, he gets the game. So do you feel like, because we've also worked with, brands, we've done brand partnerships in the past, and, it's either like the brand gets it or they don't. And do you think it's because he himself is kind of in the weeds as a creator himself and just gets it?
100%. And you can see it by the way they built their media team. Like, if you watch any of Nick's videos or BPN's videos at large, like Jordan Utter is creative director of media at BPN, and they just have everything so dialed, and they're so much fun, and they're all so passionate about it. And it stems from Nick being so passionate about BPN, and it trickles down, and like he's just such a transparent leader to everybody. Like, I've been in the room when he talks like transparently about things to people, and he sat all the athletes down at Athlete Week, and he's like, here's how we've messed up as a brand over the past 6 months, and this is the trajectory moving forward, and I want to just apologize in that sense. And he said that openly too. Like, they hired a different CEO and he went back to CEO. He's like, no, I need to get my hands back on this thing, because I'm realizing that like I'm driving the story of this and how it affects everybody else. And what's so interesting is like Nick always loves having his hands on the camera. Like, he wants to be able to vlog at home. And while he does pass that off to Jordan and the team to go edit, it's part of his rhythm, in the same sense of training is his rhythm also. And so he really enjoys that process and loves that process. Tony told me a couple of weeks ago, he's like, yeah, he he just feels so out of whack when he can't like actually weekly be talking to camera and talking about BPN. It's, I think, really therapeutic for him. What's so fascinating about all of this is virtually everybody on the BPN media team knew me from my main channel before I became an athlete on the team. So when we've all met in real life, they all come up to me, like everybody on the media team, which I have personal relationships with virtually everyone now, but they'll come up to me and be like, okay, so I watched Making 3,000 of Passive Income back in 2019 and it changed everything. It's like literally the reason I'm here right now. And hearing those stories is like absolutely crazy because now they're in a salaried position doing creative work. And so there were stories like Tony was a creative as well. And that was the same thing for him. He knew my main channel before any running stuff happened. And so he said that there was a lot of hype when they brought me onto the team because they're just like, what? This is mind blowing because we know him from something completely different. And yeah, it's just been this really wild and awesome intersection of my worlds. And I feel like when you can mix those things, it's incredibly powerful. But it's moving into contracts that I'm doing now where I like have another brand that wants to sign me as an athlete. I don't know if I really ever want to do like a shoe deal or an apparel deal, but it's like one of those. But for now, before doing like a huge apparel contract, I'm getting hired to first do a sponsorship on the channel, but then we're making a mini documentary about my life and progression that's going on their YouTube channel. So they're hiring me for my actual filmmaking skills, and I'm gonna be hiring out some of that to the studio. And so it's this weird hybrid of commercial work within the running space. And I'm making all these connections where we could make a spec ad whenever we want and send it to whoever, and they'd probably buy it. So it's a really cool angle to have with your foot so firmly like in the door.
Yeah, that's awesome. Has it switched? Have you been recognized for like your running channel and people have no idea that you do the filmmaking stuff as well?
That's all the time at races now.
That's awesome.
People like just have no clue that my main channel exists. And especially early on when the sub count was lower, they're just like, how is the quality so high? And I just have to be like, oh, well, I'm a filmmaker, blah, 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 you know.
How's the quality so high? That's funny.
Yeah.
It's like, you shooting this on your phone,
traditionally,
man?
the running space on YouTube's all just been like, you know, standard picture GoPro. So that's changing. That's been evolving. But it's crazy the intersection now of people reaching out to me. Like there's so many DMs I have of, okay, I want to start making running content. What camera do I need? And I'm like, oh no, it's happening again. Like it's just kind of transitioning, and people are now like, oh, I want to be a running creator. And so they're seeing the quality of stuff that we make, and they're like, oh, well, he would obviously have some insights for that.
Would you say that you need a secondary person to make the running stuff like at the highest level that you want it at? Like, do you need like Cyrus follow you and like film these shots? Because I remember when I was training for the marathon, dude, it's a pain in the ass to set your phone down. It just totally throws off your kind of rhythm.
I also never understood how Casey Neistat did it in his vlogs, where it's like he's telling you your training thing. I'm like, but you're setting that up. Like you must be running a few seconds or maybe like a minute faster than you're actually showing, because like.
And Casey's wicked fast too.
But you know what I'm saying? Like he's running with the camera, then he's setting it up, then you're going back, doing the shot, picking it up. Then,
Oh yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, he's quick with it at this point. Like it would maybe take 2 or 3 seconds for him to position and then run back. So it's like he is continuously running. But yeah, that's obviously a new frontier we're going to have to explore with Cyrus moving on. And like I said, I can still hire contractors out to do specific stuff, but most of the time what I'm realizing is people will sit and listen to running YouTube. Like I can sit down and talk for 20 minutes and I'll still get a 55% retention on that video.
That's crazy.
Because also so many people, especially in the winter, are training on a treadmill and they'll just listen. Like they're not stopping and they're not moving around. And that's why triathlon in the YouTube space is massive too, because people are on bike and they're just watching. That's another really interesting angle.
We need to hit the triathlon guys, bro.
We got
like
to
if
the whole thing.
I could probably make hour-long videos and they would still get 30-40% retention. I haven't tried that yet. But yeah, I think going back to a lot of people love the quality. Like I can make it dialed for a talking head and make it gorgeous. But then I could just have GoPro out on the trail on an easy run. There's nothing really I'm saying that's profound on an easy run. It's more so like the tough workouts, a Wednesday workout or a long run workout where I'd be like, hey, can I hire you to come document this, or races, you know? Would it be nice to have the highest quality all the time? Absolutely. And that's where Nick has the cheat mode with the
squad,
the whole media team. And even more so, like, they actually get demonetized all the time by using music that's not licensed. Like, they'll just throw Foo Fighters on the video because they're like, it's cool, we'll demonetize it because we're selling product. Like, it doesn't matter. The ad revenue pales in comparison to what they're actually able to grow as a business. And so it's kind of taking that Instagram, IG Reel perspective into YouTube and not worrying so much about the monetization, which now that I'm getting more contracts and we're coaching and there's more income coming, I'm like, except MusicBed we did the first contract between both channels this year. So it's like, it's interesting that now, even that, like the last MusicBed trip I went on, my rep was like, we'd love to sponsor the running channel. And I was like, what? Like, okay. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Funny, dude. How do you feel about the landscape of Filmmaker YouTube? What are your thoughts on it at this current moment?
You seem pretty hyped on the running stuff.
Yeah, you seem pretty juiced on the running stuff.
I made a video almost a year ago that was titled, Is Filmmaking YouTube Dead? And my conclusion was, I don't think it's dead, I just think it's dormant. And I think it's still kind of sitting in that space where it's, coming to the conclusion of like, what are we saying? What are we trying to communicate? Are we just making stuff for the sake of making stuff? Because none of us want to watch that, right? Like, none of us want to sit and listen to you talk about how you're a filmmaker all the time. Like, sure, that's something to discuss every once in a while and really profound. And like in the Peter McKinnon, Maddie Hapoya days, like that was the bread and butter. But since it's done so much now, like, people just don't want to sit and listen to that. So my encouragement to the space right now is try to find one or two things that you can consistently document or tell a story on, and use filmmaking as the medium instead of the topic. That's where I found so much joy in the running, is that I've been able to use filmmaking for the purpose of being filmmaking and not have to talk about filmmaking. And it's so wonderful. It's how I imagine Hollywood directors with an amazing DP feel, where it brings their story that they have in their head to actual life and on screen. It's this feeling of like, I don't need to explain how I got this shot. I can just make it beautiful, and they're going to receive it and appreciate it, and it's going to motivate them in a way the GoPro shot wouldn't have. And it's so awesome that I don't have to talk about it and that they can just feel it. That's what I love so much about it, because every time I do like a crazier looking cinematic sequence or shot, no one's asking how I shot it. They're just like, wow, that section just blew me away, or what you said and how you filmed it and how you wove it into the story just was like, so like catchphrases, I've used "be about it" so much in that channel, and it's just a constant theme that's woven through the storytelling of it all. Yeah, it's just super fun.
Yeah, I feel like the filmmaking YouTube space needs a little bit of a revamp. I don't know what it is. I feel when we had our little pre-show call, me and Costa were thinking a lot about that. We're like, where is this space going? Because I remember at least Peter's coming back, but I feel like at the height of Peter McKinnon, when Peter, Casey, when all these guys were, Sam,
Maddie
Calder, Maddie Hapuya, when they were going, Danny was going every single week, you were going every single week. There was like a height of that moment, on YouTube for the filmmaking space. I feel like every time you opened up the app, there was an amazing video from a great creator who you were super excited to watch. And I would agree with you. Like, I just don't feel like that is there right this second. A lot of the guys and gals that were super deep into it, they've moved on to doing different things, or they started a business, or they're doing just different stuff. And so it's really interesting to kind of see where that space might be headed.
What's also interesting is like, we created a second channel. We haven't posted on it. Obviously, we're doing the podcast, which is very heavily in the like photo video scene. So naturally we were like, oh, you know, we should start making videos like around photography, filmmaking, like we've seen done the past, you know, 5, 7, 8 years done on YouTube. And then we're thinking like, is it just kind of so saturated, and like how can we bring like a fresh take into it? And maybe it is what you're saying of like documenting our process of maybe more like the day-to-day stuff of like building a business, building the podcast, building an agency, and showing kind of like the behind the scenes stuff of that, as opposed to being like, this is how I got this sick shot.
Yeah, and I think that would be better received. Like I think that would be cooler than hearing me tell you how we're lighting this shot, you know?
What do you think?
Yeah, what are your thoughts, Eric?
Well, I think we have to come to grips with that. Like the majority of the audience isn't wanting to be a YouTuber or like a filmmaking YouTuber. So if they're interested in filmmaking, how can you relate to them? Because they might be a wedding filmmaker. They might do commercial work for the shop down the street. They might do retainer work for a bigger entity. You name it. There's a million different genres of filmmaking if people are making it their career. And so it's more so I think people are just so hungry in the space for show me, don't tell me, because all of the show me has, let's be honest, it's been done. Like all of it has been done. It all exists. All the tutorials are there. We're now in an age where everybody learned all that stuff, and they're actually profoundly good at the craft, and they don't need to be shown how to do X, Y, and Z. And so those people don't need the what anymore. They need a lot of why, and they need to be inspired creatively. And that's not you dictating inspiration to them. It's you showing what you've created. So a video that I was not expecting to blow up recently was a short film that I made, and it was titled The Best Investment of My Life. And since I do so much money stuff, I think a lot of people thought, because it's the thumbnail is me on Robinhood, and I think people were just expecting that, and I threw a left hook in being like, the best investment I ever made is time with my family, and making sure that I have that dedicated time with them. Because one of the lines I said was, if they despise me, like, what was it worth it? Like, if they despise me by the time they're an adult, did all of the investing and saving for their future matter at all? And this last shot, as I say that, is, I forgot the exact line, but it was a manifestation of my sentiment. It was me at the skate park with the boys, and our youngest was on a scooter, and I was following him with my camera, and he fell off his scooter. So I put the camera down, and I went to go help him up. And it's a terrible shot. Like, it's all cattywampus. The focus went off, and it's this manifestation of, I put it down. Sorry, I get really choked up when I talk about this stuff. It was a very clear visual representation of, I'm putting it down for the sake of being there for you. And it's something I actively have to do all the time, like being a dad. It's like, this stuff can be so intoxicating, like business can be so intoxicating, but like the reality is, you get to the end of your life and you have, like, I've said this many times online, like, no one's gonna care how many subscribers you had it's not on your gravestone, you know? Like, we're talking about longevity here and like what matters most. And if you can't be present with the people that you love and are closest to you, then like, what does all this stuff mean? You know, I went deep. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate it. And I think
but
it's something that we were talking about the other day. It's like, if you're filming every single moment, like, are we living these moments, you know? And what is that fine line of, like, yes, this is our job. Like, it's your job, it's my job, it's Coast's job, it's many people that listen to this show's job. But there's this delicate balance of like trying to not bring my camera everywhere that I go and not film everything that we're doing, because I'm in the same boat as you, where it's like, one day I want to be fully present with my kids. And like, I work so hard now to try to set myself up for the future. And like, you do that for your kids. But I watched your video when you dropped it, and I felt like, you know, a big, I resonated a lot with it, because it's like, the last thing I would want is to work tirelessly to where my kids don't love me. And like, I work so hard to try to have this family be set up to not have to struggle. And then, you know, you're not there with your kids. And I think that like in our society, that's how a lot of people are. Like you hear that from like friends in college that I would chat with that don't have great relationships with their families, but their dad or mom was super successful and they're like very well off. And it's like, what was the point of all of that hard work? You know, I think it's very interesting.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I'll get deep here with you too. Like my girlfriend has, you know, we've talked about like getting married, having kids, having a family. And I'm like, it's not going to happen like right now. But then I think about like the timeline that you want that. And I'm like, then you think about, well, if you don't have kids or you postpone it, you can work harder and you can like become more successful. And then you think about like, well, fuck, I would want, if I look back and you kind of zoom out, you're like, well, you want as much time with your kids as possible. And then it's like, then you see the gurus online of, you know, they're giving all this like advice on work harder and grinding. And it's like, well, a lot of them don't even have kids. So it's like, it's not even applicable to you because you're in a completely different, you know, state than them. Right. But yeah, it's weird because it's like on one side, you want to work really hard and we're all driven and we want to see success. But on the other end, it's like, well, what's enough? And at the end of the day, I think we can all agree that like family is the most important thing. And it's like, if you can't spend time with your kids, granted me and Braden don't have any, but like God willing, like we will have a family one day, you know? And so, yeah, it's just things to think about for sure.
Yeah. It's the balance of everything that we do in life is, you know, you don't want to press too hard into one thing because it sacrifices the other. And so it's finding that balance. And then it's another short film I made. It was titled, most people read it as content, but it was actually content. And the last line of it is like here and spending time with them is where I truly find myself being content. And that's what came up on the screen. And I think contentment is something our society super struggles with, is when is enough. And you have to draw that line for yourself. And you know, obviously I want a life with my wife when we're empty nesters where we can enjoy ourselves, but it's not going to be at the expense of the time I have with my kids now.
Yeah. I also think, you know, seeing everybody's success on social media,
it's so hard. I feel like that's ruined. Yeah. That it's been, dude, this is the weird double-edged sword of social media, because I genuinely would not know much if it wasn't for social media.
Sure.
I feel like I've learned so much of my life skills from random people that I will never meet on the internet. I've connected with so many people. I met you from the internet. Like a lot of my friends are from Instagram or from TikTok or from YouTube. And then at the other side of it, you see this really like sad part of social media where it's this massive comparison game and you're looking at these people, and you're right, it's like a never ending rat race where you get this car and then you got to get the nicer car, and then you trade that car and then you get the house, and the guy next door to you also has a bigger house. So you want a bigger house and a bigger boat. And it's like, when does that end? You know, and it usually ends, I feel like, in a catastrophe.
Yeah.
If you don't reel it back and try to be content with what it is that you have right under your roof. It's a really brutal game, and I feel like a lot of people do struggle with it. And I've struggled with it in the past for sure.
100%. I do want to talk about Moving Still because it was deep. If we're getting deep on the podcast, like the film was deep, and getting to hear Joe's story. I mean, when I think of like my favorite photographers, he's easily in the top 3. I've been following him for a minute. So I loved getting to see a different side of him, and a lot of his story I had no idea about. You kind of just see somebody online taking amazing photos and you resonate with that. And then hearing everything that he went through is pretty insane. Like it was super well done. And I think it was really cool that, you know, you got to work with someone who you're a friend with, but you guys share, you know, the common interest of both running and using a camera. So how did the idea for the documentary Moving Still come to be? And what was that process like?
I feel like it was the the way I would have wanted it to. It was New York City Marathon 2021. It was his first marathon ever, and it was maybe my fourth or fifth. And I tagged him and another running YouTuber on Twitter the day before, just being like, can't wait to share the road with you guys. Like, go get yours. And then he DM'd me after I tagged him. And I think he knew of me at that point because I had been building the photo video stuff. And he just texted me like, you gonna be at the ferry 5 a.m.? And I was like, absolutely. So he's like, okay, I won't have my phone, so hopefully I'll see you there. And I'm like, oh, well, okay. It's a 50,000 person race. Like, we'll see. So of course I got to the ferry and I saw his little beanie and I was like, that's him. And what was really special about that morning was, I think, I imagine at that time Joe was really exhausted of people approaching him and wanting his time to talk about cameras and talk about photography. And we just spent the entire morning talking about running. And it was a very new, rekindled love for him. And so if you watch the film, that iPhone interview before New York City Marathon was the morning we met. And it was this idea before we had to split ways into our corrals. I was like, hey, this is your first marathon. Let me document it for you. And so I'm like, let me interview you real quick. How do you feel? You know, and he's like, oh, there's nerves. I'm so excited. I put the work in, da 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 da. And I knew that would be special for him just on a personal level. So he went and obliterated that race, had a debut that was like most people could only imagine. And shortly after, I was at a point in my creative career where I'm like, I want to try something deeper. I want to try something more profound. It felt like a lot of the wedding films I'd been making were redundant, and I tried to dice it in every different way to make them different and stand out. And so it's like, I would love to take a crack at like a proper, even just mini documentary. So shortly after, DM'd him back and was like, would you be interested in, you know, doing a series like going to Boston, or, you know, you trying to break 240, because that was his next goal. And he was like, yeah, right. Yeah, let's do it. So then we just kept going back and forth for weeks, and it just kept escalating and escalating until the point where everyone in the studio knew Joe and his work. So everyone was excited to try it out. And then it was just a story of just keep saying yes. And so no matter what the circumstance was, we just kept saying yes to telling the story. And it brought us to 18 months of production and a feature length film. So yeah, I mean, wouldn't trade it for the world as far as experience and like meeting Joe and his family and understanding him more as a human, and just throughout, not even just the deep relationships we formed with Joe and Maddie and their son Oliver, but all the people we came into contact throughout the way. It was just, I couldn't have dreamed of like what the position it's put us in, and like who we know now, and the opportunities we had in the process, and just forever grateful for that experience.
How far into meeting Joe did you learn about his story, and how were you able to get him to open up like that? Because a lot of the stuff, you know, he's talking about trauma, his story is insane. It's really vulnerable stuff. And if you don't, you know, I feel like as a subject, if you're not trusting the person who's making the film about you, you're not going to be willing to go there. So how far into your relationship did he open up to you? And like, how did you go about forming that friendship with him for him to feel comfortable enough to open up to you?
Especially given Joe's circumstance where he was taken advantage of. And, you know, if you watch the film and understand, like he had no reason to trust us. And yet so we went into the documentary with the intent of the story being, is he going to break 240? That was it. And it's crazy to think back about that being the conflict and the premise of what it ended up being. But on that first trip, after a couple of days of filming, him and I shared a car ride together, and we pulled into the Airbnb, and we had just been chatting through his past, and he started opening up more, and then we sat in the driveway, and he just unloaded so much of it. And I was blown away had no clue, as a lot of people. I mean, at that point, really no one knew. But it was right before he released his book. And so Lay of the Land is his book where he tells his story, and it's through a series of his imagery throughout the years. And so he gave me a copy, and I don't read at all. And I read that thing in 2 days. And I was just so compelled by it, where even in the car, I was like, if you're willing to go here and do this, like we're ready to go there with you. And he's like, okay, let's just, again, keep saying yes. Like, let's just, what's the next step? And so that process was so difficult, you know, as he said in a lot of the premiere Q&As, he's like, I let them in fast and I let them in deep. Like, they didn't understand really the breadth of this until we started going to places like his hometown and actually experiencing like the stuff we ran into there and how he was feeling in that process. And yet he just graciously kept allowing us to keep telling that story. And it was deeply uncomfortable at points. Like the interview we had the day after kind of the chaotic moment of going to his hometown, he was pretty shut down on the couch, and rightfully so. Like, to have to revisit all that and say it in front of a camera is not the funnest thing to do. And so, you know, there's moments of I'm sitting behind the camera in tears, just being like, I don't want you to feel like we're trying to exploit this story or use it for our own gain. I need you to know that. Like, and there's so many processes like that. And he's like, no, I know you're not. I know. So to hear so many people resonate with his story and have similar scenarios in their past, and the beautiful circumstance of Matthias being such a close friend of his and his therapist friend, who's just so unbelievably profound, coming to the conclusion he had in the film to then have people walk away with this new strategy to deal with their own trauma. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it felt like, oh man, just in that sense too, all of this is worth it to be able to give people the power to understand this concept and understand what forgiveness looks like in the midst of really traumatic things experienced in their life. It's one that's not often told, you know.
The storytelling was beautiful. I thought the filmmaking was also stunning. It was very, very exciting to watch and to see, you know, your process as a filmmaker and how that whole thing came to light. Is there something that you learned from creating such a long film that you could share with us? I'm making something that's longer in the next few months, and I'd love any advice that you have to share on creating like a really long documentary and keeping it entertaining throughout.
So in the middle of it, I would have been completely lost and unable to continue without my co-director, Steven Schultz. He jumped on to direct it with me at that point when I was on the verge of a mental breakdown between production and costs and continuing to say yes. And he graciously jumped on and helped me tackle that role. And subsequently, our producer, Gene, in our studio, Gene Yoon, who also did the same. And then every trip from then on out, he was booking flights and hotels and like figuring out all the logistics for us, even up to and through all of the premieres and everything. So what I came to understand is like community really matters in a scenario like that, because without the trust that we had with one another, no one would have been willing to sacrifice and risk their time in that way, which with what ended up not being any kind of financial success, to be able to tell a story so profound. And so, yeah, I mean, Steven and I also edited the entire film. So we passed it back and forth to one another and used each other as emotional support throughout, because we gave ourselves deadlines and had some really, really difficult weeks in grinding through that edit, which ended up being 75 minutes long. And it really made me understand on a new level, like how unorganized I am and how much I need other people at large, and specifically how much I need other people on projects that are bigger than like my own silly YouTube channel. So thankful for them, and other people who volunteered their time on the crew, other people in our studio, and people we've met along the way. Ryan Booth, who's a huge commercial and narrative director based out of New York. he for some reason just wanted to hang out with us during the process of it. It kind of blew our minds that he's just an incredible human. He wanted to encourage us in the process of all of it. We flew him out to Sacramento for Joe's race, and there was one moment where we were all just kind of like in a semicircle around him because he's insanely wise and very experienced in the filmmaking world. And he's like, guys, this doesn't exist. Like what you're doing right now, it just like, this doesn't happen ever. And he's like, turn around, look at the table behind you. He's like, there's $100,000 worth of gear on that table behind you. And he's like, and none of it's rented. It's all your gear. Like you all came together and did this. And we're like, well, I guess we did. That's insane. That's pretty cool. He's like, you should be really proud of this and what you've made and created. And then him being his humble self turned and like started doing all the dishes. It's like, really cool, amazing experiences like that. Where you're like, wow, I'm better because of talking to Ryan and being friends with him now.
The Rocks all need to go watch Moving Still. I have one more for you. We'll get you out of here. What is some advice to your 18-year-old self? If you could go back, talk to 18-year-old Eric before this journey, before all the marathons, what would you say?
I first think of slow down, and not necessarily slow down in your pursuits with creativity and entrepreneurship, but slow down to think about how your actions affect other people. And earlier start guiding the way you navigate life through a lens of empathy for those around you and who are closest to you, because that's what matters most. And don't use your desires and what you want to accomplish as a stepping stone, or the people rather that are in your lives as a stepping stone, as a means to that end. But how do you integrate them in, have clear communication throughout, and help them understand that that goal is a collaborative one and not one that is just for yourself.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode 146 of the 505 podcast. If you're still here, please go check out Eric's channel down below. Leave us a like, drop a subscribe, and we'll see you all next week. Peace.